Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tish Crawford-Jones, and I'm a director at Q4. I help to lead our EMEA client base from our offices in London. Thank you all for joining us today. Our session is on what's next for AI in IR, opportunity versus responsibility, in partnership with NevIR. So thank you very much for that partnership. For those less familiar with Q4, we're a leading platform provider for IR workflows, with our IR platform supporting public companies globally with their websites, IR events, CRM, shareholder ID, and analytics. At Q4, we are really focused on innovation, particularly how AI can help IROs work smarter and not harder. We're seeing this shift in real time with the introduction to the market of Q, which is our AI agent, which is built into our Q4 platform. But with this and many other AI agents, we're seeing teams unlocking capacity to focus on higher value activities. So today, I'm lucky to be joined by a brilliant panel that shares our focus on innovation. Isabel, Irina, and Laura, I'd love you to be able to introduce yourself to everybody on the call. Isabel, should we start with you first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Isabel Villela, and I head investor relations and corporate comms for GoviX Uranium. We're a small Canadian listed company, and we've recently did a merger with Tombador, so actually we are now called Atomic Eagle since 2 days ago. Yeah, I am sorry, I have a really strong interest in AI for investor relations and have been researching that and writing about AI.
Irina, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Irina. I'm heading investor relations at Mr. Specs. So we're Germany listed, also small cap. We are one of the Germany's leading optical retailers. And I think regarding AI, for me, this is still, I would say, an ongoing exploratory journey that's I'm still figuring out my own way in IR there. I think I made quite a few changes already this year, and definitely there's a lot more things coming up next year when it comes to the website or what we're doing, for example, on all sorts of different, I would say, aspects when it comes to investor relations.
And Laura?
Yes, my name is Laura. I'm a lawyer at Kennedy van der Laan, an Amsterdam-based law firm, and I'm specialized in data protection and AI-related matters.
Lovely. Thank you all so much for introducing yourself. As you can see, we've got a brilliant panel to be able to have this discussion here today. Just some housekeeping before I start. We are going to have some Q&A at the end, so please pop any questions that you have into the chat, and these will be collated to be answered by the panel at the end of the session. Okay, so let's jump straight in. So the first topic that we're going to look at covering is the AI IR crossroads, so that transactional versus strategic element. So how can data and AI-driven insights help investor relations earn a stronger seat at the leadership table? And what cultural or organizational barriers still prevent IR teams from taking on a more strategic role? So Isabel, would you like to give an answer for that one first?
Yeah, sure. I think that IR has changed quite a lot since probably 20 years ago. And it is still changing. It is becoming more strategic. To give you an example, I used to work for this engineering company called Cookson, materials engineering company, and they had this business called the laminates division, and it was a business that was either on or off, and the company was interested in selling that division, but they didn't really know whether the market would actually like that change. I then went and sat down with all of our sell side analysts, which were about 12 at the time, And the overwhelming response that I received is, yes, please sell this. In fact, I had an analyst that even told me, if you gave it away for free, we would still be happy that you sold this business. We hate it and we don't think it adds anything to the company. And I gave that feedback to management. And I think that helped as well when we decided to sell it. And we were right. And the share price did increase 6% on the day that they sold. And then it went up to a 10% increase by the end of the week. So why am I telling you about the story of Cookson is because I keep going back to this. Data is power, knowledge is power, and AI has the power to give you knowledge. And investor relations is at the receiving end of this because we receive large amounts of data from very different parts of an organization. And we have to provide that data to management and the markets to then make strategic decisions. And in terms of preventing IR teams from becoming more strategic, I think that the biggest barriers is still when AI is seeing more for communications and reporting role. And that, some places are perfectly fine to have that, but it is a shame because IR is an information gatherer, is a data gatherer, and that gives you knowledge, and knowledge is power.
Thank you for that, Isabel. Irina, do you have anything to add on to that?
Fully agree with Isabel. Love the example as well. And just to, let's say, zoom out, if I may. In the end of the day, something that at least helped me to go more from the reporting function to more strategic function, actually be part of the extended management board, is you need, in a nutshell, to solve your CEO's problems and issues. So let's say if his problem is the market doesn't understand importance of M&A, or the market doesn't understand the new vertical that he thinks he wants to, I would say, start in a year from now, right? It helps you to know this kind of information because ultimately you create a story. So if that's a new vertical, you have, let's say, 4 reporting, and every single, I would say, quarter reporting, you start talking about the market, the penetration, the TAM, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time the company communicates it, everyone is happy about it because you build a story throughout it, right? But for that, you need to know what is the end goal, what is the problem, so to say. The same thing with M&A, right? Exactly. Great example from Isabel. I couldn't agree better. I couldn't agree more with that, to be honest. I had something very similar also, and pretty much on all the companies I ever worked with, whether it's an M&A topic, whether it's an activist topic, whether it's bolt-ons, transformational, dividends, change of, supervisory board members, etc. If you know the end goal, I think you can definitely create the story and you can start shifting the market narrative. And that's where AI actually helps you, is it allows you to have more time to do that, to think about it, and I would say outsource or to simplify some of the low-hanging fruit, something super technical that can be basically done by somebody else or something else. And that's exactly the time, the 2 hours, 1 hour, 3 hours, whatever it is that you're getting to ultimately become a strategic function for your CEO and CFO. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, from what you've both said, it's that it's the data gatherer and then obviously that efficiency piece are the 2 pieces that you're kind of highlighting, first of all. And if we think about, the next kind of topic that we can move on to, which is the AI as an accelerator, empowering IR with insights and that efficiency. Isabel, if I can ask you, maybe, can you share some examples of how AI is currently being used in your IR workflow? So whether it's sentiment analysis, benchmarking, or investor engagement, and let us know some of the specific tools that you see are being used as well.
Yeah, I use AI for pretty much everything. For example, research, AI as a sounding board. I draft social media posts with it, investor targeting, etc., etc. But I think that pretty much most communication professionals or investor relations professionals are already using it for that anyway. I think that there is scope for even more. There is, for example, in other areas, for example, AI. I read an article the other day that said that your CV is more likely to be picked up by an AI tool if it's actually written by AI. So this probably the same works for your website. So if you take AI and ask AI to write your website content, you probably will get more likely to be read by AI, given that AI loves AI. There is, a huge breadth of users. I think, particularly in my case, in areas where you have a strong retail following, AI is crucial. Because retail will definitely be using the more free, widely available AI to do research on your company. So I think to summarize, it's really AI in general, fantastic tool if you know how to use it. I think more and more IR departments are using it and are realizing that. But I'm sure Irina will have other ideas. She's always very creative on how she uses AI.
Okay, the bar is set very high right now. So I'll hate to disappoint, but no, I fully agree with you because I think we're already almost everyone I'm speaking with, everyone is using, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever it is, notebook, etc., to create the podcast and to draft things and to brainstorm, etc., etc., etc. So I think that I won't really surprise anyone with this. I mean, on my end, to be honest, I want to do a lot more next year. But also what I realized is that I need corporate communications for it because, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later when it comes to press releases, because I love your point that AI loves AI. And really, AI really loves specific types of press releases that are very important. And I even had a case, we just had our Q3 reporting 2 weeks ago, and it was super interesting to see the share price movement over the next few days. But I'll talk about it later, of course. So no, going back to the question. So I'm definitely doing all the usual suspects. Then of course the sentiment analysis and transcript, earning calls, benchmarking against the peers, etc., etc., etc. So I would say everything kind of relatively basic, but I do think that website is the next kind of battleground in a way, at least for me internally inside my company, because I do want to change a lot of things there and a lot of things adjust towards ultimately data crawlers and AI versus obviously people reading it. But I'm sure we'll talk about it so for later.
Thank you, Irina. So it's about how can AI help IR teams move faster or deliver deeper insights to executives and boards?
Well, apart from the things that Irina and I just covered, I think that I don't know, if we take a step back, and I've spoken about this before, with this brilliant matrix called the Rumsfeld matrix, and I think that you can really think AI really helps you with four things, and these are all going to help you to move faster and deliver deeper insights to your board or your management team. So the first one is, the things that we know, and we know that we know them. So like I know how to do a press release, and I'll use AI to help me refine it, or a social media post. And I know how to do that. AI can do it faster. I'll use AI. And there's the things that we know that we don't know. So I don't know this competitor. I don't understand this term. And I will use AI to help me do that. So that's research. And that, again, gives us information, and information's power. And then we have like the third one, which is the things that we know, but we don't actually know that we know them. And I can give you millions of examples of that because IR teams often do that. And I'm guilty, which is you collect data and then you don't know what to do with it. You see, oh, so many people are coming to my website, or X many people are interacting with this post. But so what? What do you do with that? And more AI can help you with these things that you know, but you don't even know that you know. So you get that data into AI, get AI to analyze this. And then finally, I think the things that we don't know that we don't know. and this is interesting. And the best example I can give you of that is when you make an employee redundant and you say to them, yeah, go tomorrow. No, no handover, just go. That employee will be sitting with a lot of information that you don't know that you don't know. And you can't possibly know what you're missing because you don't know. And that is also where I think AI can help you with. Find out the things that you don't know that you don't know.
Those are really good points as well. Irina, I know that you covered off some of the bits before. Have you got anything additional to add to that piece?
Fully agree. It's just one example that came to my mind regarding what you don't know, but we have so much information. I recently literally dumped 2 years of notes from my investor meetings into AI to analyze the trends and to basically give me the buckets of people who want to buy a blog, who want to sell a blog, who are looking for a specific metric or doing X, Y, and Z. And I basically created a list of kind of in which camp do I have how many people. And this was actually super interesting and helpful I would say, we were between two things when it comes to our kind of reporting. And we just clearly saw the kind of the 60 versus 40% of investors were asking for this specific view versus that specific view for our kind of steering. So that would not be possible because I would not be going through 2 years of notes personally. So therefore, AI was definitely helpful there. Just building on Isabel's points earlier. So yeah.
Thank you for that. So, and I know you were mentioning, the two of you were mentioning in relation to like AI, liking AI. And as generative AI becomes, key in the way that investors discover and consume information, how should IROs rethink their website strategy? So from structure to content to stay visible and credible in AI-driven search results. And then maybe next also, how should success then be measured when AI platforms, not people, are increasingly the first to like read your content? Isabel, maybe you can give us some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me just tell you a little bit of the things that I found out that are not the obvious ones, which is it is actually possible to track which AI tools actually coming to your site. So you are able to say, okay, that much traffic is coming from ChatGPT or it's coming from Claude or etc. Although most of it will be coming from ChatGPT, I assume anyway. It is possible to track the sources that ChatGPT is using for particular questions that you might expect to be what investors may ask. So in our case, what are the top 5 uranium companies? There are actually tools that can allow you to say, okay, when ChatGPT is answering that, these are the tools that it's going into. So it's going to mining network, it's going to Google, it's going to, it will tell you which sources that you can use to gather that information. There is also research that shows that around nearly 30% of all of AI responses are drawn from journalism, but then another 30% from blogs. So that's also helpful because you will need to make sure you understand what's being written about you from blogs because AI is going to be picking up that. And only 11% of it is from paid media. So that's also interesting for you to assign your value to your budget. And I think that, there are lots of obvious ones like, and I think Irina can cover those better than I can. But the only other thing that I can think of is give credit where credit is due. AI works by association, so you're more likely to, if you want to be associated with one of your peers, make sure you always mention your peers. And that will help. And finally, if you go when you run through your website via a tool for the visually impaired, you will then be able to get an idea of what AI is seeing because they don't necessarily care, for how pretty the website looks, but how it's structured is the main thing. And you might think that you are seeing what AI is seeing, but if you go through a screen reader, you will have a much better idea of what AI is picking up.
Thank you, Isabel. Irina?
Yes, honestly, there's a lot. So my starting point was I installed, which I forgot about, surprisingly, roughly 2 years ago, a widget on my website to track which pages are basically being seen or viewed, right? And I have two languages because I'm a German company. So I have German, English. And then based on that, I can also see from which geographies people came, whether it was a bot, whether it was a person. I think it's calculated based on how many seconds the certain person X spent on the website. And I honestly forgot that I ever did it. Nonetheless, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I went into this tool and it was just mind blowing to see how where do people or where do bots ultimately look into? And this was honestly 90% were in my news flow page, like where you actually have not the downloadable press releases, but where it's basically one page, right? So it's like a one page and then it kind of opens up to the right, like the next press release. Then what I realized is that if it was downloading specific documents, it's very much focused on the name of the document, right? So nothing funky. It had to be the brand name, sorry, it had to be the company name, it had to be the results, it had to be the specific quarter, et cetera, et cetera. So it had to be very, very structured. The same thing, we actually are doing a test where we have two press releases. One is basically written for a person, so it's nice, the bullet points are not really bullet points, they tell a story. And then the second press release is the press release that is done for AI, right? Where you have key key kind of key KPIs, so very boring heading, but very black and white heading. Q3 results plus 10%, boom. And then you have 5 bullets, net sales, profitability, gross profit, net debt, et cetera, which is not something, at least speaking with my core comms people, they don't like it because this is not really, like what journalists like, because it's very kind of standardized and not really pretty. But that's ultimately, if I look into impressions, trackings, and everything, this is the press release that ultimately gets picked up the most. Another point that I think is super important, exactly on Isabel's point, is the 11% only go to paid media. And to be honest, something that I personally think right now is why don't we get another sell-side paid research? Because ultimately, the paid research that we currently have goes directly to the public, so it's available for everyone. And that is a great source that I ultimately saw already a few times that was picked up by first I think, kind of magazine, newspaper, etc. And then it got basically checked again and written again like 3-4 days later I think by chatbot or whatever that was. So ultimately what you see is very interesting these days. If you had a reporting on, let's say on day one, share price reacted on the first day, on the second day, but actually the time period for how long this information, especially new information, is circling around and being picked up by the new kind of online magazines, newspapers, etc., is roughly 14 days. So what I ultimately saw in my share price is that a lot of the trading actually happens 4 or 5 days later, and it's automated trading as well. So that I thought was very interesting personally for me because of course it's much harder to right now separate where the share price moves and like what kind of information was released because information just got picked up later, right? On 4, 5, 6 days later. And ultimately I saw the research at the 14th day or 2 weeks after the publication. That's where you ultimately get the biggest kind of the vast majority of views, the vast majority of likes, kind of information. So in a long story short, there's a lot of stuff to be done around the website, around press releases, no PDF documents, and it's a journey. It's a journey for next year personally for me. So the beginning of it right now.
That's some really, really good insights from both of you. So thank you so much. I think that so many people will have gained quite a lot of material there to be able to start to digging into. So I think you've got other people probably looking at what they need to do next year as well. So thank you for those two. So now we're going to move on and shift gear a little bit to Laura. And the next topic that we're going to cover is the dark side of AI, as a lot of people might say. So the risks and the ethical kind of considerations. So Laura, how do emerging EU regulations like the AI Act shape what's acceptable or expected when using AI in corporate communications?
Yeah, well, when we talk about emerging EU rules like the AI Act and GDPR, I would like uh, I would like to highlight three big shifts that I see. First, under the AI Act, you don't just have chatbots or content tools anymore. You now have AI systems, and that sit in a regulatory framework. So if you use AI to segment audiences or profile stakeholders, personalize messaging, that may bring you into high risk or at least closely scrutinized territory. So especially when people's rights or access to services are affected. But even for lower risk use cases, such as drafting press releases, social posts, or internal announcements, the AI Act and GDPR expect risk management, transparency, and human oversight. So I think that's an important one to keep in mind. But also, the regulations, they sharpen what is acceptable in how you influence people with AI generated content. So the AI Act introduces transparency duties. If users are interacting with an AI chatbot on your website, or if you use AI to generate synthetic audio, video, or images, then you're expected to label that appropriately and not mislead people. And then we have the GDPR, because the GDPR sits on top of that. If you use AI to analyze behavior, sentiment, or engagement at an individual level, then you need a legal basis, you need clear privacy information, safeguards around profiling and automated decision making. And then there's a strong focus on manipulative or misleading practices. For example, using AI to micro target messages in a way that exploits vulnerabilities or that blurs the line between opinion and fact. It's increasingly seen not just as questionable ethics, but it's now also a compliance risk. And finally, these rules, they translate into practical expectations for corporate communications. So you need to maintain control over sensitive content. For example, no inside information, trade secrets, or unnecessary personal data in public, free of charge AI tools, but only use approved, contractually governed AI services. So you know where the data goes, who the provider is, and how to comply with the AI Act and GDPR. And also think about embedding AI into your existing approval workflows and crisis plans. So if an AI generated post, for example, is wrong or misleading, who spots it, who pulls it, and how quickly can you correct the record?
Thank you for that, Laura. I think there's a lot to unpack there, and I think a lot of people do understand that there needs to be an oversight really from individuals consistently, and like you just mentioned, that there are workflows in place to be able to catch errors. And I think that bias and misinformation are hot topics at the moment. So how can IROs ensure that the data and the models that they use are transparent and explainable?
Yeah, well, speaking with my AI and data protection lawyer hat on, I'd frame it like this for IROs. First of all, before you worry about fancy explainable AI, you need basic clarity. So, what data are you feeding into tools? Is it internal data like CRM, investor engagement history, meeting notes, or is it also external data like market data, analyst reports, sentiment feeds, news, etc.? But also, what models are you actually using, or what tools are you actually using? Is it CRM insight modules, analytic dashboards, website chatbots, etc., etc.? Document that in a simple language, like we use tool X to do Y based on data ABC. Then this becomes the foundation for your explainability and your bias checks. Because if you don't know the inputs and purpose, you can't judge the outputs. It's as simple as that. I do appreciate that most IROs won't build models themselves. So you'll probably rely on vendors, and that's completely fine. But then your due diligence has to fill the gap. So for every significant AI tool, ask questions. For example, what data was used to train and test the tool? Were fairness or bias tests run? Can we see the results in a non-technical way? But also, what explanations can the tool provide for its outputs, and how do you mitigate hallucinations or fabricated facts? Also, make it a rule that AI outputs, they are suggestions and not facts. So, for example, an AI summary of investor sentiment should always be checked against source documents and market data. And for sensitive users, for example, prioritizing investors or again segmenting engagement, require human review before acting on AI-driven insights, and also a quick note of why a decision was made and not just the system said so. And then from a GDPR and AI perspective, this human in the loop approach, it's exactly what regulators mean by meaningful human oversight. And finally, I think this is perhaps the most important. You need a culture where people feel comfortable questioning the model. Encourage your team to ask, what would convince me this output is wrong? And also make it easy to flag and correct AI-driven misinformation within the organization. So if a tool misclassifies an investor, misquotes your own results, misrepresents a risk, you should be able to feed that back to the vendor and to your internal do and don't list, but also people should feel free to communicate this.
Thank you, Laura. I think that gives people a really good foundation as to what they need to start looking at, because there's quite a lot that they need to start to build upon. Do you have any other advice or examples or questions that IROs should ask when they are thinking about selecting a vendor for AI as well?
Yeah, well, there are many questions you should ask your vendor, but I would start with some questions about roles and responsibilities. I think that's your starting point. So the question would be, for example, under the AI Act and GDPR, how do you see your role as a vendor? Are you a provider? Are you a processor, a joint controller? And what role do you expect us to have? Do you provide a written allocation of responsibilities? Is there a data processing agreement in place, etc.? So that's your starting point in order to determine the requirements of the vendor and the obligations of the vendor. So also important, you want to know how the vendor has trained its model, what data has been used, and the data sources used. Not only to train the model, but also to fine tune it and to validate it. And you want to know the legal basis of the data that's being used, if it's personal data that's included, and whether special categories of data were involved. I would also want to know whether the vendor is using your data or your end users' data to further train or improve the models. And if so, on what legal basis, under what controls? Is it possible to opt out? Is the data anonymized or aggregated? And how is this reflected in the contract? And also very helpful to understand what documentation, but also impact assessment support and cooperation the vendor provides to help you to comply with the AI Act and GDPR. For example, are there DPIAs in place, or any AI risk assessments, or supervisory authority inquiries that you should be aware of, or where the vendor is willing to help? And what audit or inspection rights do you have under the contract? And lastly, I'd like to point out the fact that you want to know how your customer data, if any, including in prompts, input, output, or logs, is collected by the vendor, but also stored, further used, and where it's stored geographically. You want to know if sub-processors are involved in third countries. So you want to have the full picture on where the data is going and how it's been used. I think we discussed data protection and privacy compliance already, but it's important to make sure that your vendor provides information about that specific topic. whether the AI system, how it's classified, is it high risk or not, but also how can the vendor help when there's an incident, for example, a data breach. So yeah, I think it basically boils down to this, these questions.
That's very comprehensive. So I think that's a really good list for everybody to start to think about when they're thinking externally at the vendors as well. So they had the conversations with the vendors, and then the IROs need to start to think about what their part is. And when we think about responsible AI in IR, so balancing that innovation with credibility, what does responsible AI mean in the context of investor relations for you? So we could say, should IR teams develop an internal AI policy? And I think you've mentioned that is something that they do need to be doing. So what key areas should those policies cover?
Yeah, fair question. Well, in investor relations, I would say responsible AI essentially means using AI in a way that's legally compliant, trustworthy, and aligned with your capital markets obligations. So that would, in my opinion, touch 4 dimensions. The legal compliance part, we already discussed this before. So the AI Act and GDPR compliance, it's very important to keep in mind. But also market integrity and disclosure rules are important. So IR sits right at the edge of inside information, selective disclosure, and market abuse rules. If you use generative AI to draft earnings releases, Q&A scripts, social media posts, or website content, then responsible AI means ensuring the outputs are accurate, not misleading, and consistent with official disclosures, and that nothing price sensitive slips out via an AI-powered chatbot or automated response tool. You also want trust and reputation. So and a good reputation. So your investors, analysts, and regulators, they will care less that you used AI and more that you remain accountable for the content that they see. So responsible AI is therefore about having clear human accountability for any AI-assisted communication. So you can stand behind what's been sent to the market. And another thing is that if AI is used to segment investors or prioritize engagement, it must not result in unlawful bias or exclusion. For example, systematically favoring certain types of investors in a way that conflicts with equal treatment principles or your own governance commitments. Having said that, should IR teams develop internal AI policies? Yes, absolutely. It's important both internally and externally. It shows that you take governance seriously. It also gives clear guardrails, and it reduces the risk of a rogue prompt, for example, resulting in a misleading statement. So yes, it's very necessary. And if I had to design this IR AI policy for a client, I would at least include the following blocks. The block on scope and roles. So which AI tools does this policy cover? Is it generative AI for drafting, translation tools, investor chatbots, etc., etc.? But also, who is allowed to use AI in the IR context and for which tasks, and clarify that human staff remain accountable for all market communications, even if AI assisted. I would also include use cases that are allowed and use cases that are prohibited. Allowed, for example, drafting first versions of internal talking points, Q&A suggestions, etc., etc. And prohibited can be, for example, letting AI publish directly to market-facing channels without human review, or using AI-generated text as is in regulated disclosures. I don't think you want to do that. And be very concrete. People need to know what they actually can do with AI. We touched the data protection and confidentiality part earlier. I think it's important to include that. So, what types of data may not be entered into the AI tools? And if personal data of investors are processed, do you have a legal basis to do so? Are you allowed to use that data? And if so, to what extent? How can you make sure that you honor their access and deletion rights? So, make sure that, well, GDPR is covered well. I think it's also very important to have human review, accuracy, and record keeping included in your policy. So make sure that all AI assisted content that may be seen by the market is reviewed by a competent human, and consider record keeping, for example, for significant disclosures. And make sure that there's transparency and in relation to investor facing tools. So if you deploy chatbots or AI assistants on your IR website, you need to make it clear that the people are interacting with AI powered tool, provide easy access to human contact, and implement filters so the bot cannot generate or reveal non-public information. I think that would be a nightmare if that happens. And lastly, training. It's so important. Escalation and incident response. So if you provide basic training for your IR staff on AI risk, I think that's very important to make sure that hallucination, bias, data breaches are discovered when they should be discovered. Make sure there's a clear escalation path, and also embed AI into your existing incident response and market communication procedures. I think that's the most important to include in your AI policy.
Thank you so much for all of that, Laura. Giving us a really, really deep understanding of the compliance and the governance aspects of this AI world that we're trying to traverse. So I know that a lot of people will have taken quite a lot from what you've shared with us today. So thank you very much. So moving on just to our last piece, we're going to look at AI tools in IR. So some real world examples and some use cases. So I'm going to go back to our IROs. So Isabel, maybe with you first of all, how do you see tools, for instance, like the one that we have, Q by Q4, fitting into responsible adoption of AI?
Yeah, so I have used Q4 for webinars, and I wish that I had the budget to be a full-time, client. I quite enjoy the fact that everything seems to be quite well thought through, and that you are respecting pretty much the most of the requirements, or I probably all of the requirements that Laura mentioned. And I think that it's one thing that I would say to add to what Laura has said is that it's nice to see that there is some regulation now. If you, like me, started using AI 3 years ago, it's pretty much based on common sense. And for IROs, it's quite obvious that no one's going to be writing a press release based on ChatGPT, or that we will take a number that ChatGPT just churned out, because all our numbers, most IR teams will be checking the same number about 15 times in about 25 drafts of a press release. But of course, you do need that, and you do need that reassurance. You do need some system that will say, that this is rubber stamp approved. And I think that that's probably one of the things that you guys have that it's quite great, because you do have responsible AI built into the Q4 system, and you allow that information sharing, which is crucial because information is power, and to give that from who is watching the webinars, etc., to the person that's here.
Thank you for that, Isabel. Irina, have you got anything to add for that?
Honestly, not much. I think Isabel summarized it beautifully, because I fully agree. I'm not a user, unfortunately, but I think it makes so much sense to have this seamless experience from your CRM to who's on the website, what kind of pages are being seen, how long did they spend, did they do the rewatch, etc., etc., etc. So no, I actually think as an ecosystem, it makes lots of sense, and yeah, generally big fan. So yeah.
Thank you, Irina. And so finally, I want to be able to ask you what do you think the next 12 to 18 months looks like for AI in IR? And what should we be watching out for? Isabel, how about you first?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be building, proprietary AI tools. I've actually read an article that said SaaS businesses are getting a little bit nervous because what they had before that was quite difficult to recreate can now be recreated by your 19-year-old sitting in a garage. I don't think we're there yet. I think that it's not as simple as it sounds, but it's certainly simpler. And I would love to be able to write, my own code and then use that for a very specific, case of a very specific tool that I need for my business. Yeah, I don't think that we'll be seeing that in 12 to 18 months. And I think it will all go back to information and the more use of information that we can get and the speed that that information is going to reach your management team and the speed that you're going to analyze large amounts of data in a responsible way. Since we have Laura here, I might just keep going back to in a responsible way and hopefully in a non-biased way as well.
Thank you, Isabel. Irina?
So I honestly would try to build my own agent. I'm actually just super curious about that. So at least that's the plan for kind of December, January. Now the reporting season is over. But yeah, I'm curious to try it. I think it's much easier versus coding like it had to be in the past. So nonetheless, right? So 12 to 18 months, that's definitely something I want to spend a bit of my time on. And honestly, just to circle back to the point from Laura and Isabel, this kind of stamp of approval, I feel this is something that will be top of my agenda in the next 12 to 18 months because uh, I feel a lot of companies need to revamp their websites. They need to create that ultimately the website is a single source of truth. So you need to have so many links, so many connections, the same wording. Technically, it has to they have to speak to AI ultimately. So I think that's something I'll spend quite a bit of my time on because I'm afraid there's no other way. The website is the source of truth, and it just makes sense to make it then easy for AI to pick up the correct information versus getting it from, I don't know, Wikipedia, although we already cleaned up our Wikipedia page as well. But I feel we will focus a lot more on giving more kind of trustworthy information to the data crawlers, whether it's a Q&A document after every single reporting, kind of specific texts and kind of the wordings that AI can pick up onto. So I think that's yeah, and maybe even paid research. As I said earlier, I think it's interesting because it's at least it happened at least 3 or 4 times already now where these were the first numbers that were published. They were not coming from the website, they were coming from the sell-side research reports and his opinion about the company. So for me, that was interesting. And that ultimately resulted in a share price increase. Especially if you're a retail stock like mine, I think you need to be playing basically both fronts on that side.
Thank you for that, Irina. I mean, it's traveling at speed, I think, everything at the moment. So I think we probably should expect quite a lot in the next 12 to 18 months as well to get our teeth into. Thank you so much for your time today. I think what we're going to do now is we're collating some of the Q&A that's coming through on the chat as well. I would encourage anybody on the call to submit any questions that you have. And whilst we're just waiting for any additional questions to come in, I would love to ask the three panelists to give some closing remarks that they might have, and then we can go back to the Q&A and see what we have there. So, Laura, do you want to go first and just give us any closing remarks that you might have?
Yeah, well, I think it's good to keep in mind that well, there's a lot of new rules popping up in the EU, and they don't often very much align. So I just discussed the AI Act and the GDPR, for example, but we do have more. So it's important to see the full landscape, the legal landscape, and determine how you should apply it on your AI system in your business. I think it's helpful to have the full picture to be compliant and use AI in a compliant way.
Thank you, Laura. Isabel.
Yeah, I think to summarize, it all goes back to data and knowledge. Use the tools that allow you to not only gather knowledge, but use the knowledge that you have. And AI helps with a lot of that.
Thank you, Isabel. And Irina.
Okay, it's hard to go last. So I'll be very practical. Speak to your website data provider and basically put there a code that will track where people are coming from, who they are they bots, what pages. So at least you know where to start, because I'm pretty sure all of us will be revamping our websites very, very soon. But at least at that point in time, you know where to start. So
thank you. Thank you all for that. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So I'm just going to, a couple of them I can answer as well. So somebody did ask if we will receive a recap of the mentioned points and advice. We will be sharing a summary and the recording after this. We also got asked a question in relation to any examples that are available of internal AI policies for investor relations. So before I ask you, Laura, if you've got any specific ones that you can share, we are also at Q4 working on a framework, so we can also share that. But Laura, do you have any specific areas that you can share with anybody?
Yeah, well, the thing is, under the AI Act, you are required to comply with a lot of obligations, and you need, well, to have a policy in place to govern that, but there's no rule on how this AI policy should be, what topics it should include. There's no template made available by the European Commission. So, as a company, you do have some room to determine how you want to draft it. So there's not a golden standard that you can use. So it very much depends on your business needs. And I think the topics I just discussed, I think they are essential to include, but well, you're free to draft it in the way you think it suits best within your organization.
Thank you, Laura. And so we have another question. It's quite wordy, but I am going to read it out because I think the context behind it is really important. And then Irina and Isabel, if you let me know which one of you would like to have a go at answering it first. So we have somebody that said that they met a few other IROs in the US who are using AI, especially to understand and prepare what kind of questions they will get during sell-side analyst calls or during roadshows with investors. AI tools that can scan one sell-side research analyst and can digest his or her thinking and predict his or her questions. Also, internal LLMs are very interesting. IR using it live during meetings and type in a question and get an answer. It is kind of a search tool into all of your documents. Do either of you use any of these tools and have any thoughts on these tools?
Well, why don't I start and then Irina can share her experience. I don't see any problems in doing Q&As based on an analyst, particularly if the research is publicly available. It's a no-brainer. You just stick the report in there. You put your press release that you've just published, and you say, what do you think this analyst will think about my press release, and where based on the areas that he's focusing on that report, can you predict which questions that he's going to be or she is going to be asking me? So yeah, absolutely have done this in the past. With regards to internal LLMs, that would be a dream for me, but that is something that requires a little bit more of a budget, which I don't have at the moment for a small, non-profitable exploration company. But I know a lot of companies do that. I am not sure I would be comfortable with doing it and using it live during a meeting unless I was 100% sure that, it's not only opening the document that I've myself written and that it's the right version of the document. But yeah, absolutely, it would be my dream to have an internal LLM that would just have access to all of our data.
Thank you, Isabel. Irina?
No, I totally agree with Isabel. Nothing against doing it. I personally wouldn't do it, but I'm a bit old school when it comes to this. If I know that there's a person on the other side and that's the analyst, I'd much rather speak to them to death, basically, to understand every single point, understand their model, etc. Versus kind of plug it into AI. If I don't know who's on the other side, like a bot, a crawler, etc., then AI 100%. So personally for me, I don't think I would have done that because I just know very well what's happening there, what kind of questions, issues, topics, etc. But I think it's just kind of like a personal thing. If there's personality with the person. It does help though the AI to kind of pull the model and dump it into the Excel. So that's nice. And I can identify sometimes the mistakes and the issues. So that's good if you are very technical into modeling with your analysts. So that could be good. But I would also not bring it into the meeting because I mean, you want to have this human factor there. At least I would.
Thank you for that, Irina. So I think thank you so much for all of your time today, everybody. I think it's been a really, really great discussion. I know that there's just so much more that we can dive into, and I know that over the next 12 to 18 months, we will absolutely have more discussions as more things come out, as we use it more, as we understand it more, and probably as more regulation kind of comes out as well. I think it's really good to have open forums and open discussions to be able to make sure that everybody can learn from each other, and we can grow with using it because we know that it's not going away, but it's really important to be able to use it in the most appropriate way, and to get the most benefit for the investor relations profession as well. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. As we mentioned, we will be sharing a summary and the recordings afterwards, and we hope that everybody found some benefit from this call. So thank you so much.